do you think that if regular monitoring of vitals becomes a habit, then the fatalities could be reduced? Because if it's not a habit, people ignore the symptoms, as seen in a few cases that we've seen. I mean, some of the cases of celebrity deaths have come into light, but they've brought up this issue that most of the people do not even understand that they could be having symptoms which could be related to a cardiac issue because they're not so severe.
So it's a good question. The only thing is regular monitoring of vitals in whom. It can be double-edged sword. If you promote it at mass level, then the cost-benefit ratio or the convenience-benefit ratio may not fit in. So it should be in a particular subsets of population recognized, like elderly population are already having a morbidity like hypertension, diabetes, even if they don't have heart disease or a stroke. Obviously, people suffering from heart disease, stroke should be monitoring. So this is a bit of a new thing. Clinic monitoring or clinic evaluation and home evaluation. So we are, I think, talking about the home evaluation as I understand. So maximum blood pressure monitoring and pulse oximeter, saturation, heart rate monitoring. These are the things which they should be taught to measure and what to look for in that. That should be taught to them. So it will reduce, a lot of, many times they feel sick or mildly sick and then they ignore it. That time if they check their BP or pulse oximeter, saturation or rhythm, if any of them is irregular, they know that we have to go to the emergency or to the doctor immediately. So this making it a habit will help in that subset of patients. Minus that, if we just promote in all the general healthy population who are in early 20s or 30s, no comorbidity, it may not help it. But certainly in this population. And then as far as celebrity, those deaths are concerned, there are a lot of, I think, layers and layers in that apart from regular monitoring of vital, teaching them, people need to be taught that, pay attention to them and come in proper time rather than ignoring them. So monitoring and then utilizing that value to seek a proper help at proper time, both things go in hand. I think that should be emphasized.
Something.
Absolutely, sir.
See, when he asks what should be monitored normally, so there are no clear guidelines in medicine. What vital sign, what should be done? There are no guidelines, clear cut. What I will suggest from my common sense is that every adult more than 25 years of age, he should at least check his blood pressure once in 6 months, at least, normal person. And every person should have annual health checkup, which includes blood sugars, some lipid profile, and there are few investigations. They should be done minimum for everybody. And people, there is a family history of diabetes, there is family history of coronary artery disease, somebody has died already, somebody had a bypass surgery, they have to be even more careful. Normally, these days, what we do is that the cardiac checkup is incomplete without a proper stress test. So, when we check these people, we also do a stress test, whether it is simple TMT or stress echo, there are various types. So, people who don't have diabetes, a stress test every 2 years is okay. But if somebody has diabetes, somebody has risk factors, family history of disease, then the stress test should be every year. So this should be the minimum. So what I will tell the business world people, if they can spread my message of 3 things, what are those 3 things for the public? Teach public that you may or may not invest in stock exchange. Please invest in health. When I say invest in health, we should tell all the youngsters कि जब आपकी नौकरी शुरू हो जाती है, when you start earning, please spare 10% of your income for health. Number 1. Number 2, have annual checkups, as I said before. Number 3, everybody should have medical insurance. Rather, I would say that we should request the government of this country that health insurance should be mandatory. It should not be an option. For example, I cannot take a car on the road if there is no insurance. But I can dance in the center of the highway without insurance. What is this nonsense? So health insurance is mandatory. Mandatory means people who can afford, they have to pay premium themselves. People who can't afford, for example, the government should pay the premium. That, you know, these schemes of Ayush and this and that, you don't need the schemes. You just need insurance for everybody, and it is possible. By the way, it is very much possible.
Correct.
I'll just continue to add something more on that. In fact, the common dictum which I use to educate or make our patients aware, I mean, whenever we have health talks, I always tell them to focus or try to know their numbers. This is what I stress. Like you know your house number, you know your telephone number by heart. Similarly, you should try and know your numbers, which means blood pressure number, blood sugar number, and blood cholesterol number by heart. I mean,
And
you
your
should
weight.
be aware.
And your weight.
So you should have these numbers,
Simple.
these simple statistics at your fingertips. Anybody who asks you, in addition to telling your other profile, you should be able to say, my blood pressure is so much, my sugars are this much, my cholesterol. So idea is that if you're aware of these facts, then only you can try and prevent. If you try and start looking at these numbers only after you have suffered a problem, then you have already missed the boat. You already missed the prime time of saving. And basic issue of these three numbers which I emphasize is that blood pressure, sugar and cholesterol, all these three ailments which lead to cardiac or all variety of cardiovascular ailments, in large majority of situations, they do not cause any symptoms. So majority of the patients might be having high blood pressure or high sugar without being aware of it. So unless and until you check them, that's why we call these three ailments as silent killers. So unless and until you check them, you'll never be aware that what your figures are and what exactly you should do. So only if you're aware, you'll take some preventive measures to prevent. So you should emphasize that people should know their numbers.
You see, I would like to add a little bit. Once the question says some celebrities, so I'll tell you just to add to that, because one of the very senior cricketer was treated by us in Gangaram Hospital. To see him, most of the cricketer came, his youngest colleagues and all that. So when they know that I'm a cardiologist treating him and all that, so they asked me, Dr. Saab, we are so fit, we have no blood pressure, nothing, everything. Then also we got heart attack. He also got and got stented. He died suddenly in cricket and all that. So what is the reason? So that's what both of them, I want to just emphasize that people get their BP checked, for example, and they know that there is some symptom for blood pressure. There is some symptom for diabetes. I always emphasize there is no symptom for cholesterol. And nobody does that checking. Unless you check it, you will not know whether your cholesterol is high. And it is strongly linked to the family history. When I took the history of these 3-4 cricketers of the country who got problem, all of them had family history. Their father had heart disease in a very young age. They didn't know their cholesterol level, but they were young, is less than 60, less than 50, or their father, uncle, they were having cardiac. And they said, we are fit, but they got heart attack. When they did the angio, all arteries are blocked. Even can't do bypass surgery on them. So then they look into the number and they found the lipids are very high. So never checked it, so they got the disease. So that these are the important messages they should know, that they should control it. And I always say that every birthday, whenever with the birthday, one day before that, you get your annual check if you're healthy, so to say you're healthy, and pick up if there is any abnormalities there or not. And regular checkup, blood pressure and other things is very important.
Yeah, but I think we should tell the people that there are two kinds of fitness. One is apparently fit.
Yeah.
Another is medically fit. Whether you have been certified, cleared by a doctor that you are really fit. That's different. He said very right. And this guy KK, that singer, I think.
Yes.
He just collapsed and died because he never had a proper TMT or proper stress test. All the vessels were blocked on his investigation, autopsy.
Yeah.
So apparently fit doesn't mean anything. And I tell you, blood pressure is called silent killer. Why? Because majority of the patients, they don't have symptoms for many years. People walk to our OPD with 220 BP. When I tell you need admission, they get crazy. This guy wants to make money out of me. I'm okay. Because there are no symptoms initially. So lack of symptoms is not a guarantee that you don't have a problem. So that is what we want to emphasize.
Yeah, I think this is a very important and a very what comes out is that the only way to safeguard you, because my next question would have been, what are the symptoms? If something happens to you, how do you know that there is a cardiac problem? But I think what is coming out very strongly is that the only way to safeguard yourself and protect yourself is to prevent, and the only way to prevent is to have a regular checkup and keep a track of what your body is going through.
You see, the
You want to say
important, I want to say that
Indian Lipid
in our
Society-
country, the other issues that, your first question, I was just answering that from that
Yes.
part. We have got 60 million people suffering from the cardiovascular disease,
Right.
which includes basically, most of them are the coronary artery disease and stroke, which we say combined together. And the mortality of heart attacks in our country is almost 25 to 30% of the all mortality, and still is the number one cause of death, degenerative, as Dr. Kler said. Although it is still little less than the Western world, it is 40%, but we are still catching up very fast. The number two most important fact is that in our country we get disease 10 years earlier compared to the rest of the world. What is the reason for that? So what Dr. Saab and all of they have shared with that, we are getting risk factors earlier. Hypertension, diabetes, lipids, we are getting earlier. Then tobacco is a big problem in our country. Not only smoking, but chewing tobacco is a big problem in our country, which is not there existing in other part of the world. Stress, of course, Dr. Saab has very well touched that stress is playing as a whole. But these are the risk factors which are highly prevalent, and when we went into more detail, is it only the risk factors which are coming earlier? We found no, it is genetic reasons also. And when we look into the data of our country, which we did a study on familial hypercholesterolemia, I mean, in which runs in family, young people getting heart attack, they have very high cholesterol. They have no diabetes, no smoking, no blood pressure, but they die with a young coronary artery disease at the age of 45 or 50. We look at the lipids, the very high LDL is 160, 170, 180. So that family alone. And now we are also finding an LPA is a very emerging risk factor, which they thought earlier. We found highly prevalent in our South Asian, our country, much more than the Western population. So genetic factors are also playing a role. So all this put together, we are getting disease earlier. And so we have to be very careful about the...
We talk about risk factors. One has to understand there are risk factors which are modifiable, that they are unmodifiable. Like family history, I can't change. No, this is unmodifiable. Being a male, we can't become a female. Increasing age, we can't stop. I can't remain 40 for the rest of my life. So these are unmodifiable risk factors. But rest of the other things like smoking, treatment of diabetes, treatment of hypertension, exercise, stress management, they are modifiable factors. And though there is a very significant role of family and gene, but we have yet not reached a stage in science that we can change the genetic constitution of the person. It is, people are working on, but right now, whatever is modifiable, at least we should stress on it.
I have to say something like heart attack and heart disease in the young population. As sir has pointed out, Indians, usually we are getting the disease 10 to 15 years earlier. We are genetically predisposed. Set aside these risk factors, genetically predisposed. And nowadays, all of us are getting patients of 20s. Last month, we have got at least 3%, less than 25 years of age. Younger one was 20 years old only. 20 years old. It's so commonly it's happening. The other things already discussed like stress, sedentary habits, obesity, which is coming in younger age group. One thing, this Indian Lipid Society, they are recommending the gift at age of 21 years. So they are saying all of us should give our children for health checkup at the age of 21 years. They are right in that. Majority, I had a few school going children, maybe 16, 18 years, plus 2 or 10th like that, having a high cholesterol level because of the bad food habits, because of the sedentary habits, not going for the play, over stress for the studies and all. So all those things are creating problem for that. So this public awareness is a must, And sir was already telling us that people are coming to us 220 by 120 BP and they are saying, अरे तो आपको तो कुछ ये तो हम ऐसे ही चलते रहते हैं, हमको कुछ नहीं होता है. Similarly, they are talking about the sugar also. Some of them are saying 300 sugar तो मेरा तो 10 साल से चल रहा है, अभी तो मेरे को कुछ नहीं हुआ. So we have to create an awareness in our society. So these are the parameters, and you may not have symptoms, but in coming days you may have a big problem. So that we have to say. One thing sir was telling about the monitoring at home.
So two things are there. We have to standardize the instrument. So many blood pressure instruments are there. And if you measure one BP instrument, another BP instrument, readings will vary. So there has to be some standardization of all these, like pulse oximetry, like BP monitoring, like pulse monitoring. Some standardization should be there. And the much more important thing is that how to see the BP, the patient should learn it at home, how to take your BP. That is a must. One patient is coming 2-3 times, they are taking BP and every time is varying. This is an inherent problem with all these electronic machines. It is mentioned in some of the literature of Omron. So if you take BP in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, the readings will be varying. So that's what they are saying. If you are taking frequently BP, you have to take an average of 5 or 6 BPs. Then it will give you a correct answer.
Got it.
Yes, I agree. This type of education, like you were asking about saturation monitoring.
Yes.
So person has to know how exactly he should look at the saturation, what parameter he should see. Like one important thing which I always used to teach my patients is that when you're looking at the saturation from the machine, you have to look at the so-called plethysmograph, that the pulse wave should be visible before you start reading. If your pulse wave is visible, that means that your pulse oximeter is now sensing your pulse, and now it will give you the correct value. Because people actually had put any inanimate object inside that pulse oximeter, and it will give a reading. But you have to see that you don't straight away read that value. You see that it's actually carrying the all parameters. If you're measuring blood pressure in a wrong fashion, obviously the values will be not reliable. One last thing I just wanted to mention about this genetic predisposition, which I think is very important fact to emphasize to public, that they need to realize that Indian population, like as Dr. Sani was saying, that we have a specific genetic predisposition which possibly cannot be measured by simple parameters which we check by blood pressure or cholesterol or sugar values. There is something which is inherent in us, which has been scientifically tested, that not only Indians are getting more disease while being in India, Indians settle abroad. Indians in Canada, Indians in Singapore, Indians in various countries are showing this disease much more than their local native population. So definitely there is something inherently wrong in Indians which is predisposing them to this. And over and above that, if we don't follow a good lifestyle, definitely we are killing ourselves. So this is something which people have to realize, that they are at risk and they have to be extra and extra cautious.
Absolutely. Absolutely.